virtually everybody here I know, and I don't know everybody, but had felt a deep personal relationship with my dad, because he made people feel that way. No matter who you were, he was, he made you feel special, and that you were the scope of his interest whenever he was near you or with you, you know. And I'm sure those of us who knew him best can all agree that, especially with children, he had a set of extraordinary attributes which were only rivaled by his confounding defects, you know. You know, Dad grew up on a hard life. I remember, I can't count the times that he reminded me that he walked to school 10 miles in blizzards barefoot on broken glass. But he was a humble man. He never showed me the bottom of his feet and the scars. I have so many memories, and I know that I'm reading a history book now that deals with the Fetterman massacre, and it said something that we have a tendency to romanticize history. And I know that with my dad, that's especially the case, because those of you who know us closest know that, you know, our life was as children in that family was a whirlwind of, you know, it's just amazing that when the tornado stopped, we were all on our feet, you know. And to some of us, the wind still blows hard sometimes, but I just want to think of some of the things that immediately come to my mind when I think of my dad. And I remember one time he was telling me that he used to think how tough he was, and that he played football in college, and he drank, and that's, you know, that's a not so rare combination, right? He said he went into a bar in a small town where they decided to raise a little hell outside of the immediate vicinity of the school, and he said, and I walked up to the biggest, meanest looking guy in the bar, and I sucker punched him right in the face. I said, what happened? He said, he kicked my ass. But of all Dad's accomplishments, and there were multitudes of, you know, it seems like, you know, it's real life. For every great accomplishment, there's a balancing failure, and his life was full of accomplishments and failures in many respects. But he was key in changing the entire medical milieu in Rapid City, South Dakota, along with a nun. They drove they drove against virtually everybody, and would not give up, and planted one of the most well-respected regional hospitals, I'm sure, in the country. He did give a lot of time and energy to people that only eternity will probably show. I remember that when I was 8 years old, I went with him to Pine Ridge Reservation, where they crowned him Great White Medicine Man. And I asked why. And one of the elders there pulled me aside and said, your dad has given 1 day a week for the last 10 years, or however many years it was. Your dad has given one day a week every Thursday, and I never knew it. That he would drive to the reservation. He did a lot of stuff he never told anybody about, which is pretty solid biblical principle. Don't ever let the right hand know what the left is doing. But I remember when I sobered up, which the first time, which was a miracle, and as with each preceding time. But I remember that I called him, and I was in pretty desperate, low down straits, and he sent me a letter, and he said, welcome. At the end of the letter, there was a $500 check, and at the end of the letter, it said, welcome back to the ranks of the living. And I asked him later, I said, how did you know I'd really sobered up? He said, because the telephone number you gave me was the local AA. So anyway, it's odd because I'd always remembered my dad had, and I think my siblings do too, he found it so hard to express emotions, and I think it was the tenor of the times, and maybe some of my cousins experienced some of that too. But I remember the first time I saw him after I had sobered up, and he told me, I love you, Fred. And I couldn't remember him having ever said that. But he said it so many times throughout the rest of my life, I couldn't count it. And our mother, as many of you know, was a beautiful woman, our birth mother, and she was racked with hereditary and iatrogenic mental illnesses. But she was a loving person and had her eccentricities. But it's interesting because she was raised in somewhat of an elitist atmosphere. And when she'd get mad at Dad, she'd remind him that he was just a humble Millea from Emmitsburg and kind of put him down. But as the years went by, Mom somewhat disintegrated, but Dad elevated. His character grew all his life. I really can say that. And through all the adversity, and we siblings can get together and mumble and grumble occasionally about mistreatments and offenses, but where was I going with that? We can get together and say that, but the fact of the matter is that we put him through a lot of adversity also. And I can't talk about my dad without mentioning Rudy. That was an unusual aspect in our childhood and our future development. It wasn't all that positive to us in many respects. When you marry someone and you say, I'm married, I'm not going to raise your children. But something about Rudy that Dad needed. I gotta say, if he ever did anything for himself that was significant, it seems like it was marrying Prudy, because he loved her and she was a stabilizing influence on his life that was, in his own regard, really amazing. I remember we were just talking about it at the end when he was living at our home in California, and she was diminishing fast, and he would say, he'd look over at her, and she really had lost a lot of her faculties, and he'd look over at her every 5 minutes and go, I love you, old lady. I love you, old lady. A couple more things I'd say about my dad are that he had an amazing attribute that rarely, it's hard to say never to anything, or always, those are global terms, but he rarely to never said anything negative about anybody. And I mean, if that's not an attribute, I don't know what is. I'm still looking for that one. You've always had something good to say about anybody. And I remember towards the last years of his life when we've come together to be with him and Rudy, and one of us would say, oh, I want to go to the Mexican restaurant. And the other would say, I want to go to the New York, or I want to go to the Chinese restaurant. And everyone would look at Dad and he'd say,
why not?
Why not? Why not? And everyone who knew my dad, you know what he'd say? Why not? Why not?
The reason is freezing.
And I can't leave at least momentarily untouched the idea that my dad was probably one of the greatest raunchy limerick masters. Now, I will say that that's the only thing I'm going to say in that one. Enough said. So I'm glad that everyone here is here because they love my dad, because I know that I know you all did, and we are really excited to listen to some stories from some of you that give us more insight into his complex and amazing life. He was truly a larger-than-life person, and you know, sometimes we wistfully think of those we've lost and those we love, and it's pleasant, and we hope to see them again. But I can truly say that since my dad has passed away, I haven't gone a day without thinking about him. You know, it's really amazing. And if I could just say one more thing, his religion was basically, as people know, was basically AA, his foot soldier religion. And at the very end, as with everybody, he was questioning, you know, he'd say, do you think that, you think I'm going to be in heaven? And all I could tell him is I can prove in one verse you're going to be in heaven. And I said, Dad, every day of your life since you joined AA, you have prayed for the will of God in your life. And I said, one sentence, I can prove it. And it says, he that doeth the will of God abideth forever. And he felt so comfortable and so good to hear that. Thank you, Fred.
Well, one of the things I want to say first is that I can't tell you how much we appreciate everyone coming to this memorial. I wanted to tell a story about I think what represents the essence of my father. So, we were sitting home on Sunday evening. So we were sitting home on a Sunday evening, and I get a call from a friend of mine. And by that time we were living in Washington, D.C., had been there a few years. We had moved there from Milwaukee, and this was a friend from Milwaukee. And she calls me up and she says, oh, hi Paul, how you doing? She said, if I recall, you're from Rapid City, South Dakota, aren't you? And I said, yeah. She goes, well, I've got a situation where my son, he's been hitchhiking through the West, and he's in Rapid City, South Dakota, and he was picked up by the police for vagrancy. And when they searched him, they found one psilocybin mushroom in the bottom of his backpack. And they took him and interrogated him and decided not to prosecute, but they put him back out on the street without any shoes or any money or anything. And I was just wondering if you knew anybody that could And I said, sure, I'll call my dad. So I called my dad. He said, sure, I'll go and pick him up. And, a couple hours later, my dad calls me. He said, I picked up that strong little friend of yours. I took him to Walmart, got him some shoes. We went out and got something to eat. Then I got him a hotel room and I gave him some money so he could call his mother. And, my dad saved a lot of people through his work as a physician, through his generosity, and just simple acts of kindness. And, contemplating coming here, I realized, I was one of those people. Thank you.
Well, my brother Fred and Paul both just made me weep, so.
Wait till you hear the second half.
That's my excuse for crying already. Anyway, I really wasn't going to talk because I wrote the obit, and I just, Dad was really complicated, and he was my best friend, and as a surgeon, he was brilliant. As a human being, he was brilliant and kind. As a father, he was a good friend. And he was always there if you called him and said, I'm really worried about this. And he'd say, it was the tone of his voice. He would always say, everything is going to be all right. And I think I miss that most of all. Even knowing that everything might not always be all right, I believed him. He had that kind of authority. I think all of us in this room know that there were times I envied your parents that they stayed together and that they were really parental, and it was hard for me. I think and hard for us. I think all of you know that my situation and our situation with our mother was complicated. She was a brilliant, beautiful woman. She was in law school when my father met her, and I'm sure she had too many children to be able to keep whatever her eccentricities were in check. And then, as the wheels fell off the cart, Dad fell in love with Bernice. And I have to be honest, I was probably the closest one to Dad. And then he died, and I became very, very angry. I have to be honest about that, because I couldn't believe my father married a woman that really loved him, but really didn't want his children. And that was so painful. And it hit me, I'm 62 years old, and it hit me at 62. And then I realized that he loved her so much when I went and caretaked them, where Fred and Vivian had them living with them. They were so kind and generous during COVID, and I would go out and caretake Dad and Prudy. And by the way, I love Prudy. I loved Prudy so much. But the bottom line is this. a lot of people have asked me, Holly, have you married? Are you married? Did you ever get married? And I started thinking I had an attachment disorder. And all my life, like, people meet me and they're like, are you married? Have you been married? And it's like, ugh. And then I see all of you, and I love you all so much. I see these faces, and I don't have to see you. I can go without seeing you for a decade. And it's like, hell no, I don't have an attachment disorder. I'm attached to all of you. To is that the malaise, right? It speaks to our genetics and our family. And, you know, I know this sounds really small, but I am so proud of being Irish. Like, my best friend is the editor of Irish American magazine. And I love that we're all here, and we're all Irish, you know, to some degree or another. And I want all of you to know I would not trade my mother or my father or even most of the time my stepmother for anybody in the world. And I loved her, okay? I loved her. But I just thought it really needed to be acknowledged that, you all know how hard it was because you saw us at reunions. And I am just so proud to be a Millea. And maybe I never got married because I never wanted to change my last name. So glad you're all here. And enjoy the lunch. And please share stories because now we need all of you to carry on and tell us stories that we don't know about our father because he's no longer here. And I know if you've lost a parent, you're like, oh my God, like when my grandmother died, I thought, and I broke out weeping. I never knew her favorite color. And it was such a small thing. So please, any story you have, big or small, it will mean the world to us. So please come share, and we'll have the microphone on the table. Okay, thank you all. Oh,
I've got a story about Rob, but I'm going to set it up with another one first. Back in the late 90s, I decided to quit being in environmental law and to go into private practice and start suing doctors. Looking back on it, it seemed like a bad idea. And one of the people I was afraid to talk to about that was Rob. And one of the first cases I got was a woman had some problems and went to her family doctor, and he thought it was a urological issue. So she went to a urologist, and he had a CT scan done. It was read by a radiologist, and the radiologist said, well, the problem is that she's got a cancerous tumor in her kidney. And so the urologist took her to surgery and took out the kidney. And when it went to pathology, they sent it to pathology and they cut into it, and it turned out there was no cancer there. And the urologist apparently didn't have very good bedside manner, and told her, well, I have good news for you. You don't have cancer. And so when she came to us, she was pretty unhappy with him, as you can imagine. But I took the deposition of the radiologist, and I really didn't know how to read a CT scan either, but I did get him to admit that there was no cancer there, and that he had just flat screwed up. So we were going to settle the case, and the client was really angry because we had a urology expert that was saying that the urologist hadn't done anything wrong. And she was really mad at us and about ready to fire us over this because she was so mad at this guy. And I said, well, wait a minute, I know a urologist. And he said, I called Uncle Raj and I said, look, this is what's going on. And he said, yeah, when the radiologist tells you there's cancer in the kidney, it's coming out. You're going straight to surgery. That's the deal. And I said, really? Have you ever seen this before? He said, it's worth $250,000 and don't ask me how I know. I felt a lot better. But then it turned out that was the first and only time that I ever got a bar complaint filed against me by a client. And her theory was that we had let the urologist out because he was represented by my partner's law firm, or dad's law firm. And the joke out was really on her because that was the whole reason that my partner liked to sue doctors, was because his dad defended them. But anyway, this led to a conversation with Uncle Roger right around that period where I called him about some other case and was talking to him and asked him how the practice was going. And he told me that he was getting some pressure from people to retire from the practice of medicine. And I really couldn't get him to tell me who or why or anything, but what I really remember him saying, and I thought about this a lot in the years since, is that he loved practicing medicine so much that he said, I get better at this every year. And I said, really? I said, you're a surgeon, and I forget how old he was at the time, but he was kind of up there, and he said, no, I really do. And I don't want to quit. And I remember, I thought about that even more lately because my partner just retired. I know more what it means now. And just hearing you guys talk about it, we always looked up to Uncle Raj so much because he was the doctor of the family and we knew what he was doing on the reservation and all the speeding tickets he got going over there. So I thought that was just such a beautiful conversation, and I was really glad that he shared that with me, that how hard it is to know when it's time to give it up. And he took that very seriously, but he really felt that he was getting better because he was so experienced and had such great judgment and all of that.
Thank you.
Okay, I have to tell a couple. First, for all of us in here who have experienced the orphanage, it's hard when you lose one parent, but it really sucks when they're both gone. And I remember, I think I talked about this in my dad's service, when Grandpa Bill passed away, and Dad came home and was like, how are you doing? And all the kids were together trying to work through things, and he's like, I just feel like an orphan, and he was bawling, and I was a stupid 20-something-year-old, and I did not get it. But then fast forward to my new lost mom and dad, it's like, you just feel so lost, it sucks. So I feel horrible for all of you to have to go through that. But one thing I noticed about, we all love Uncle Roger because he was a cool fun one. He would do all the things that my dad would just grimace at. But that's why we adored him. But he was very similar to my dad in that he would talk to us about how awesome and amazing his children were. And my dad he would tell me about how amazing Maureen was, and Tim, and Kathleen, and Megan, but he would never say anything positive about me. So we kind of always had a pact with each other. When Dad said something nice, we had to tell the other. But he really does appreciate and love you because I don't know, something about those Irish men, you're not gonna tell it to your face.
Right.
So we had that agreement. But I was telling Bernard and Paul last night, there was, I guess it was Dad's internment because Paul was supposed to graduate from college. And we were driving to Omaha for Dad's internment, and he shared with us that he was not going to graduate, had 6 hours left, but all the scouts told him he needed to go play basketball. And, you know, he couldn't pass up these opportunities, he could graduate anytime, he needs to go ahead and start playing basketball immediately. And Marty and I were like, no, you need to get your degree, and then you can go travel anywhere you want, but finish the degree. So it was a debate for 21 hours in the car. And finally we were like, we'll table this. So we get through the weekend and we're heading back to North Carolina, and Paul's like, hey, I've made a decision. And I said, what's that? And he said, I'm going to finish it. And Marty said, what was the change of heart? I said, did you know that Uncle Roger went to medical school? Doctors usually do go to medical school. He's like, did you know that he had a football scholarship? He said, yes. And I did notice that whole weekend Paul was like attached to Uncle Roger. You know, they were always together. And he said, well, Uncle Roger talked to me about how smart I was and that I was so gifted at basketball, but basketball would always be there and I need to get this degree. Thank you.
We're hoping everyone is just getting warmed up because we know that each of you has something good, bad, or different to say about my dad. But, I remember when I brought Vivian and the boys to meet Dad, and I always had.
Wait, you're waiting for the turn.
Zach needs to turn that down.
Thank
You always had room, no matter how full the table, you always had room for more people in his life to share his wit and savoir-faire and love with. And when he met Vivian and Peter and George, it was like I could tell how special it was to him, like such a refreshment that was unexpected. And every time we go to visit, and his Vivian really ended up with a beautiful father-daughter bond, because her dad died when she was young, and I know that Vivian is quite reserved, but I know that she loved Dad, was in awe of him as a reserved, elegant Chinese from the culture of the Chinese. She never met anyone like my dad. But every time we'd go see him, which was often, he'd say one thing to me, and he'd say it about 20 times in the 5 days we were there. He'd look at me, he'd look at Vivian, then he'd look at me and he'd go, beautiful and dumb, my true love must be. Beautiful, so that I can love her, and boom, so that she can love me.
Hi everybody, I'm Fern Culture. Some of you others have, but just a couple things about Roger Millea. I was growing up on the south side of Chicago, Roger was a mythical creature. He was this cowboy at a ranch. He was a musician, surgeon, and every time you saw him, he always had a joke. He always had something funny to say. And it was, he always made it somewhat mystical. And he always had easy words. So, as a kid, he had this kind of shadow of stature that we all kind of, you see Uncle Roger on this trip. That kind of thing. And I remember driving out to South Dakota, and I was 5. And with my dad, who was an engineer, drove a VW bus. My teeth were going to be rattling out of my head by the time we got to South Dakota. But, it was quite a trip. I got to see calves get branded. I got to see them get castrated. I got to see a lot of things.
Did you eat any Rocky Mountain oysters?
I don't remember that. But fast forward like 20 years. And
I know, it's hard. I'm sorry. We're all crying.
so, I quit drinking. I saw Roger at a party. And that's when it really kind of dawned on me that he was my mom's big brother. And what was true, which you guys have all heard already, is that he always made you feel like he was a really good friend. And very much a guy who had encouraging words. And because of who he was, because of the myth of Roger, those moments took on a little extra weight. So it was kind of a unique thing, and it was great. So if I had a class, I'd say, here's the Roger. So raise the class. Here's the Roger.
So I hope everyone comes up and has a story about Dad, because I know you all have a story about Dad. Okay? I was Pepco president, and I am going to insist that you all tell me. Yeah, my uniform. I want to say one quick thing, because I feel like maybe I showed my belly a little too much before. But yeah, I mean, you've seen my belly over the years, over the decades, right? Okay, here's the thing. Every time I went to see Dad, and after he retired, he was watching Fox News, which of course made me puke. But, I don't have this politics, okay? Every time he wanted to, I'll tell you one really quick thing. When he had to have a test about a dementia test, right? And so they were like, what year is it? And he said the year. What day of the week? And he said the day. And they're like, can you repeat this sentence backwards? And he did. And then they'd say, who's the president? And he'd say, that Democratic son of a bitch. Okay, that was the thing. I was like, well, I'm not sure you passed that question, Brad. Not sure. But here's what I will tell you, is that every time I kind of could see, like, if he got a little down, because he was such a social creature, my dad, obviously, like, so social, right? And I was like, I need to do something. And I was like, you might not all get this, but Sally Field in Soap Dish used to say to her producer, who was played by Whoopi Goldberg, I need a fix. So she'd take her to the mall so that she'd go up the escalator and people would ask for her autograph. Oh, you're the soap opera actress, can I get your autograph? So I was like, Dad, I need to get some milk from Safeway. Would you like to come with me? And he'd say, sure, Houlihan, if you need me. And so we'd park in the Safeway parking lot, and walking into Safeway, we would see people coming out of Safeway, and they'd be like, Dr. Millea, Dr. Millea. And we'd go into Safeway, and I would say, okay, I'm gonna get some things, and why don't, he was older, I'd say, why don't I like park you by the pharmacy, and I'll come get you when I'm done like shopping in the aisles. And he held court. Everybody walking up for a prescription was like, Dr. Millea, Dr. Millea, Dr. Millea. Like, and I could just see him bloom and blossom with every recognition. You know, it was like, oh, I was so thrilled. And we would stay, and I'd be like, I would just stand back at a far distance, not even where he could see me, and observe all these people coming up to him and telling him stories and about how he like helped someone they loved or helped them. And the last thing is, we went into a bagel shop once, and this woman came up to me. She recognized Dad, and she came up to me and she said, your father did the most amazing thing for me. He told me that my father was going to die within 6 months. And she said, I cannot tell you what the truth did for me after seeing people that were lying to me, giving me false hope. Your father told me the facts and the truth, and I cannot thank him enough. And to me, that is like old school cool. Like, oh my God, you know, like I don't need, when I go to the doctor, I don't need like well, maybe, I need the facts. And my father really could give bad news with empathy, but he gave you the facts. And so that's all I want to say. Stories if you have them.
I have a funny one.
Oh, good.
Okay.
Come on.
I'm going to tell a story about a man named Roger who came into our house, and especially since Tim is an American, really rattled. Tim was about 3, I think, and we're all running around like maniacs, as we all did. And his mom had like a bunch of food out, and then I see Dad pull Roger over, and of course I snuck in so I could listen. And he's like, "No, you got a real serious problem." He's the golden boy Tim. I mean, couldn't do no wrong, had to be perfect, and there was a problem. He knows better. Okay, so he's a little kid, he slept hard, me occasionally, not a big deal. For other people,
It wasn't.
so Bill's like, grabbing onto Roger. They were like the devil and the angel boys together, which is creepy, but true, very true. And Roger's like, what? Let's get him in here. Pull that dishwasher out. He threw him on top of the portable dishwasher, pulled his pants down, and is inspecting him, and figuring it out, you know, he's like, he's a boy, he needs sometimes at night. Don't worry about it. You're worried about it. You're making him nervous. He's being more. Quit worrying about it. Leave him alone. And he goes, get a plastic cover for the mattress. It'll be fine. And Dad was like, hey, this is serious stuff here. This is a boy that's peeing in the wrong place. He should be peeing behind the garage. He did eventually pooping behind the garage. No, but I think we should add in something. Some laughs. Yes, it's not here. It's a real thing. Anyway, and then Roger said, "You're gonna be fine, Tim. You're good." Tim's mortified because he's out. They've been looking at everything, and sure enough, I mean, within a month, he was not doing it anymore. Pretty much, he cured him with cure. Well, you know, he brought some, and he told me Dad to chill. You know, Dad needed to hear. So anyway, that's one of my Roger stories. There are many more. We always loved it when he came over because he always had some little snarky thing to say, you know, or some little funny innuendo. Yeah. That made my dad blush usually. And so he was always a joy to have around, even though I know, you know, he, as well as all of us, had his problematic things about him. But that's what makes us all human, and that is also good for storytelling, for sure.
When you sit down, let's see together. I just want to say that Uncle Bill was my father loved Uncle Bill. He, I have to say, Uncle Bill, could not say enough. And I don't know if you, and I don't expect that you did, read the Irish America story on Uncle Bill. And Dad and Uncle Bill were so close, and Dad, you know, it's interesting, Kathleen, and I'm just going to say, and I'll say quickly, that Dad and Uncle Bill, Roger and Uncle Bill, were so different, and my father admired your father so much. And I was like, but why didn't you emulate him? And you know, I'm going to tell an inside baseball story right now. When we went, and God bless Aunt Joan and Uncle John, I love them so much. Yes! Because Uncle Bill was stricter. Dad went to him first and said, "Will you take my daughters for a little while?" And Uncle Bill said, "Do not give your children away for a moment." And thank God Aunt Joan and Uncle John agreed to it, because we were in a tough spot. And we all know this here. I'm not, you know, let's not fake it. We have no secrets here. It's okay. And it is fabulous because Aunt Joan and Uncle John were so loving and so good to us. And all my cousins, Ellen, Therese, everybody that I got to know even better living with Aunt Joan and Uncle John, because everybody was nearby in Chicago, and I got to know my cousins, you know? But here's the thing, your dad was the real ballast for him, you know, and he was the goal, and his beliefs were the goal, and he cried up until the day he died about how much he loved your father.
Oh, I know.
You know,
They were each other.
because they were Irish twins.
They were
Yes. And thank God for Uncle Mike, because Uncle Mike would come and visit Dad after Uncle Bill passed, and even more. And I think Dad felt like, let's face it, Uncle Mike, you were not a saint like Uncle Bill. Okay? And he came to air not like a saint of saints. So that's all I. Oh, and here's Paul.
I'm just here to, I'll walk around here and, hey, you must have a story.
Paul is a journalist.
There we go.
So, obviously, I'm an outsider. I'm not lay. I'm very much Catholic, but I was from the good part of So, back in the day, LD had his issues, and he had to go out to see Uncle Roger, which, think about that. You get to see a lot of things. So he drives my wife, Sheila. My dad drives Sheila to Rapid City. Okay, I'm working. And this is a little bit that over the years you think about. The guy had more reach than you really think he did. Okay, my dad worked for Kasuth County. He was a motor grader, drove truck, just a common, there was no white collar about this guy, okay? 7 to 5 every day, come home, work at night. Your dad, obviously, is a doctor, very, high esteem. And my dad, I can remember him saying, oh, I met this Roger guy. He was the best guy. My dad could talk, and I'm sure they got together and just had a conversation while Sheila was out there and Elton was out there. And what was my dad going to do? Roger took him in and had a conversation.
There you go.
Okay. Go ahead a few years. Now I'm selling medical equipment, and I've got to go to Rapid City. And I don't know if it was Julie or Beldy or Sheila that said, hey, while you're out there, you gotta look up Roger. I go, Roger, who? You know what? I was sorry. So I did. And he took me over to the house, and I told you this story last time. Took me to the house. Then we're having a conversation. It's early in the morning, we're sitting in a little breakfast nook. And this was, he gets out these packets of equal sugar. I couldn't think of what it was last night. The little blue packets. He dumped them over on the plate. And now he brings out the strawberries. And I go, now I'm good. No! Dip your strawberry and eat it. Oh, bro, really good. You just want to stop. Tom, dip the strawberry in the sugar. You'll love it. So I had to sit there for an hour.
There you go.
He liked to tell people what to do.
Yes.
That's my brother's story. He took my dad, had a conversation with him, acted like they were good buddies. He was
It
just.
wasn't an app.
Huh?
It was not an app.
No, it wasn't. No.
Dad loved everyone truly,
Yes.
even for a moment.
He made my dad happy.
Yeah.
Yes.
But going back to, it was actually probably, I would say 1996, when my dad was diagnosed with colon cancer. And he was going to be very content having a surgery in Algona, Iowa. And us kids were really concerned about that. And I honestly don't remember how we ended up reaching out to Uncle Roger. Might have even been through Mom. But nobody was going to convince Dad that he should have it anywhere else than Algona. But Uncle Roger reached out to him and he said, I got a guy for you. I got a guy that I can recommend the surgery. So we, Mom and Dad drove out to Rapid City, and like Tom said, I went out with his dad. His dad took me out, but the kids were actually pretty young at the time. So we went out there, and not only did Uncle Roger, find a doctor that did a very successful surgery on my dad, but Mom and I, and of course Tom's dad, stayed at the house. I actually forgot about that. Your dad was with me, I should say. Dad ended up sharing a room with, had the curtain drawn, so I never really laid eyes on the guy, but I could tell he was an Indian. And hearing this guy and his family talk about Uncle Roger next to my dad's bed, and Uncle Roger obviously didn't do the colon cancer surgery on my dad, it was somebody else, but this, and I wish I could remember exactly what was said, but I want to hear an earful of how wonderful Uncle Roger was, and how good he had been to his family that was on the other side of the curtain. And that was a really awesome experience that we had, and I was so happy that Mom could feel good about us going out there. And when Dad was feeling better, he actually even drove him and Mom home, and Dad healed wonderfully from that surgery. But super thankful that we didn't end up having an in-out moment, and he was well taken care of.
I've got kind of a funny story.
Stand by the tape, we have to see.
I'm sorry, right here. I've got kind of a funny story from a good number of years ago, and we were coming to Omaha, and I think it was for Margaret's funeral, but I'm not 100% certain. And Paula, was the whole family with us? I think most, if not all of our family was with us, and we'd all just arrived at the hotel, and Rod was there.
Yeah.
And so we go to introduce the kids to Uncle Roger, and he meets Ryan and Tyler, and he meets Jacob. And when he meets Jacob, he says, "That's a good biblical name." And Jacob's just trembling. And then he says, Jacob, he says, "There's a lie in the Bible. It says that Moses tried to ask you a tree and walked up a hill." Jacob was just taking it all in. And he says, "I got my own room. You can come room with me." And I kind of stepped in at that point, and I said, "Yeah, you guys could read the Bible this evening. I got So one other side story, just like about 2 years ago, I was in the little town of Cave Springs, Arkansas, and I was at Casey's getting coffee. And those of you that shop Casey's have seen them go from we brew our coffee to these god-awful machines that you have to punch and say whether or not you're going to add the crap to it. And there was this guy in there that was struggling with the machines. He's like, he was trying to figure it out, so I started helping him. And he's like, "We don't have these where I'm from." And I said, "Where are you from?" And he said, "I'm from Rapid City, South Dakota." And I said, "I got an uncle from Rapid City, South Dakota." And he said, "Who's your uncle?" And I said, "Roger Millea." And he says, "Ah, the infamous Roger, Dr. Roger Millea." We just been in line to check out for a couple minutes together and had a laugh over it, but it was just really funny. Oh, and then we've got a lady friend from church, Mary Claire. And Mary Claire, she knew Jack Millea, knew the family. And she, her husband recently passed away. How old is Mary Claire? but she's at least an 8 on the first number. I think. Yeah, she's a sweethearted lady. She wears a Mary Poppins hat to church every Sunday. But she knew Roger really well. We went to her funeral for her husband recently, and Paula, they had an Irish wake for her husband's funeral. And she was the first one to get up and talk, and the Irish wake was actually held at a Irish bar called Shredders, is it? Shredders up in Bella Vista, Arkansas. And she was the first one to talk, and she gets up there and she says, my husband was a bastard. She said he was. His parents, his mom and dad were not married when he was born.
Whoa.
Anyway, great memories of Uncle Roger.
I got a couple quick anecdotes of the pre-I love you Roger. One of them, I was in high school, and we were crazy, and I was the craziest one, and we got sent to military school, and didn't exactly march to the beat of that drum too well either. I remember I came home one holiday after I'd gotten in some trouble, and one of my best friends at the time, his name was Phil Olson, he picked me up and we went and got something or other to drink or smoke, and he was talking to me about how great my dad was. And he said, your dad is the coolest guy I ever met. He says, I says, you're kidding me, why would you say that? He goes, I got syphilis. And I went to your dad. We were juniors in high school. He says, I went to your dad and he treated me and he never told my parents. He goes, your dad and I are friends. So I remember I was getting some chewing by my dad about some ill reports on myself or something. And I said, Dad, I know what you did to Phil. I said, can't we just be friends too? And he said, we'll never be friends. I'm your father. The other one, I'll think about it. I had another quick one that was in the same vein, but we'll let the blood out.
I have the PS to that. So one day I called my dad from college and I was like, okay, I have a friend and she met someone and he said, he has herpes. What do you know about herpes? Tell me everything. And he said, I will tell you everything. Tell her you don't want to get it.
I remember the other story. I decided on early emancipation and early independence, so I was hitchhiking with my hair down to here and my friend, who we couldn't stand because he was, as far as he was concerned, my friends were my main problem. And this was also a disaffected doctor's son. And we passed through Rapid, and Dad said, please, just keep going. And so we were out hitchhiking on this road. We said, yeah, we know what to do. Don't worry about it. We'll be out of your hair. We were hitchhiking on this road, and we were stuck there for 6 hours. Finally, I called my dad and I said, Dad, it's getting dark out. We're stuck for 6 hours. Can we at least just come spend the night? So he comes and gets us. And he says, you want to get picked up hitchhiking? He says, do you want to get picked up hitchhiking? He said, put a suit on. And me and my friend looked at each other like, put a suit on? And he picked up on disaffection for that idea, and he said, "Do you think I like wearing this monkey suit all day?" Oh, please, please.
Insist.
Insist.
Thank you, Dad.
There's a prize for the one who tells the most stories. And guess what? I intend to win.
This is actually one that Grandpa Bill told me about, Uncle Raj and Uncle Bill. I think I was probably in high school, and he told me that when they were about my age, they were working, building track on the railroad in the summertime. And I remember thinking, you're kidding, right? I mean, these are like kids, and they're out there. And he said, and not only that, but I was kind of worried about how they were doing, you know. So they were working with these men on the track, and one of these guys was back in town, and I said, well, how's that going out there with them? And he said, well, it's going really good, but the goddamn thing is, we're all done for the day, and these guys got their balls and gloves and their bats, and they want to play baseball. and we're trying to tell them, yeah, we've been out working in the sun all day, you know, and they were really disappointed that these grown men didn't want to play baseball. And that kind of tells you what they were like.
Yeah.
And by the way, Grandpa told me that those pictures of him and Grandma at their wedding, he told me, and I thought this was the sweetest thing. He said, that doesn't really do her justice.
Oh, the keeper of the microphone. Joan is coming.
So, Mo, you probably know more about this than I can even remember, but after Carrie died, I know that Uncle Roger insisted on funding a vacation for our whole family to go to Rapid City. And I was just barely 5 then, but I remember it because I got bit by an animal, a donkey. It was just pure Raj, and how can I help Bill? And I just remember all of us piling into the station wagon and going to Rapid, and Raj covered all the expenses, and we were with you guys like that.
It was one of the only vacations. We went to Chicago once, and we went to Rapid City once. And that was only vacation where we really went for a long-term stay. And we rode those big turtles. You know what I mean? And I got really cool glasses, super hot at night. That was like at Walter Rug, of course. Yes. And we could not believe all the signs on the road. And I was like, why don't we stand with Uncle Roger? This is so much better than Mom. So cool. So, special.
Thank you. Oh, here we go.
Yes. We need everybody that has a story to come.
And Uncle Mike, I'm looking at you.
Probably the funniest part of my story is that I've had lots of time to rethink it after hearing other stories. Like, I was going to talk about how generous Uncle Raj was after a family gathering when I was probably this tall, and we were together for I don't know what occasion. And we all got back in the car, and I heard the station wagon, 6 people in the back, laid out like sardines, sound. And I hear Mom whispering something to Dad, and Dad back to Mom, and I'm like, what are you guys talking about? And Mom really was touched. And she said, Uncle Raj paid for our hotel bill. And I was like, oh, that's really nice, but he bought your vacation?
Jack, after Mary and I lived with your family for a year and a
Well,
half.
that's the other part. My mom is the last one on the list. No, I'm just kidding.
He picked your mom because she knew she was a great mom. Okay? And
She was a great
was
mom.
a great mom.
She was a great mom.
I'm glad Ben isn't here because I remember he was a little baby and I was like playing with him in the driveway and I drove him out his head.
But to that point, Holly, I was thinking about that. And I was thinking about the day my mom got the call and she left the room and another side huddle between my parents.
Yeah, exactly.
And I didn't really know much about it until the decision was made.
Yeah.
And Holly and Mary were gonna come and they were gonna live with us. And I never heard that it was a labored decision for them. I never heard that it was a hardship. I heard as an older person now that, and I probably knew some little bits of it, that with kids that were 7 years younger and down, that it was a challenge to take in teenagers when our kids were all smaller.
I was not a teenager yet.
No, Mary was a teenager.
Right.
And Mary had friends at the Catholic school that were not a good influence.
Right.
And Mary didn't come home one night. No, I can tell this story, right?
Oh,
It was all good fun.
I'll fill in the blanks.
Two things. Mary didn't come home one night, and my mom called her best friend's mom and said, "This is Joan Belda. Is Mary Millea there?" And the woman said, "Oh, she's not here." And my mom called the police station directly and said, "This is Joan Belda of 629 Camilla Street. I'm looking for my niece, Mary Millea. I don't know where she is. I wonder if you might knock on the door of..." Same girl she had just called the mother of, and sure enough, she was there, and the mother was lying for her. They were just hanging out, being teenagers, but whatever.
I gotta say, I have to fill this in because, no, Ellen, here's the thing. Mary and I shared a room, and Mary would leave the window open because she's a typical teenager. She would leave the window open. We were on the second floor, and we shared a room. We shared a double bed, and all of a sudden, like when the sun came up, I would wake up to the sound of dirt balls hitting the wall. Okay, and I'd be like, "Oh my God! Oh, what's happening?" And I'd look out the window and Mary would be like, "Unlock the door." Okay, so yeah, she was a typical teenager, and God bless your mother and father.
And they wouldn't do it any other way. And nor would we. And it set the pecking order for a minute, but it was all good, and we love you, and I wish Mary was here.
And she does too. She
Yeah,
does too.
I
Her
know.
husband's in the hospital. He's doing well now. Had sepsis, going home today. Yeah.
But anyway,
But
we love
that's why I became a writer, because of a life like this.
Anyway, we just, we wouldn't have done it any other way. It was a beautiful moment in our life.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think that's, and then a later story when, I think my dad had passed, and my mom spent a lot of nights in a recliner in the living room watching CNN. And Uncle Roger called, and my mom picked up the phone and accidentally had it on speakerphone, but she had hearing issues, maybe it wasn't an accident. And I'm sitting in the living room with her, and Roger probably spoke pretty loud anyway, but now he's on speakerphone, and I can't walk out of the room, I gotta hear this conversation. And he was just checking on his little sister, and it was really sweet. And then it became this political banter. That wasn't all that sweet. And then it became, I think maybe I'm gonna come out and visit you and stay with you. And that was sweet, but I was like, But she couldn't take care of herself.
Right.
And I thought, oh boy, if we have these two here, we had caregivers in for her. And I had to call in the troops and go, guys, I don't know if Uncle Roger's serious. I'd love to get them together on some neutral ground that's not his place or hers.
Yes.
But it was cute, and they talked and they loved, you know, it was beautiful.
You
So
love talking to your mom. And by the way,
I should love them checking in on her.
Absolutely. And I was on the other end of that call several times because he always said, I'm going to come see you. And I'm like, he couldn't travel at that point either, right? And I'm like, that's a great idea. Let's do that someday.
Yeah, he was very serious, so we didn't know.
Yeah.
It was great though to hear the two of them.
Yeah.
Because they love each other
Always,
very, very
always,
much.
always, always. Yeah.
Oh,
This is a little tidbit because I know you want to hear the tidbit. I remember, I don't remember exactly how old we were, but Dan was young enough that Mom and Dad chose not to bring him out, but we were going to the ranch. We were coming to see you guys in Rapid City. I remember we all loaded up it would have been Mary, myself, and my brother Rob. We loaded up in the Buick Skylark. And I'm probably certain it didn't have air conditioning. And Rob had his swilly with him, which was the last piece of his blanket. And on the way out there, you know, the windows were down because of the no air conditioning, and my older sister decided to throw slowly out the window. And that was the end of slowly. But anyway, we got out there. And do you remember slowly? We fought over that blanket for a long time. Mom finally told me that you were younger and it should be your blanket. And I said, okay, whatever. I remember it was white. We got it as a wedding gift.
she's still in therapy.
But we get out there, and we had the best time riding horses and just doing all the things that we did out there, which, like I said, my memory is not the best. But did you guys have a horse named Flaxie?
Oh, I killed Flaxie because I overfed Flax. I didn't mean to kill him. But one day I walked into the barn and he was on his back and his legs were up. My sister Mary looked at me and she goes, well, congratulations, you killed Flax. He was a Mustang. A Mustang.
Well, and I'm here to tell you that my brother had the time of his life on Flax.
Okay, I'm sorry,
And
Rob.
so your dad told us that we could have him. But I think it was probably a safe thing to say because we had no means to get him back to Iowa. We were in the Buick Skylark. And, but I remember that, you know, Rob was kind of a golden child in some ways. I mean, he got this Willie,
All the family secrets are coming out.
But, yes, I remember Flaxie, and I'm so sad that he passed because he probably would have had a good life in Iowa with
I hated that ranch. I couldn't stand horses or hay or any of that business. That's why I lived in New York. Oh, that's it. I feel badly.
I've got a tidbit about Paul. I remember we went to see a movie with Dad, and we were in his Corvair convertible. And I remember that we were walking out of the theater, and we were gonna go to a Chinese restaurant. So we went to the Chinese, and we're walking out of the restaurant, and Dad said something to the effect of, when I was your age, I was so tough, I had to walk sideways just to avoid myself. When we get to the Chinese restaurant, it comes to fortune cookies, and Paul opens up one of the fortune cookies and it says, what did it say? What did yours say? We looked at Paul, what is your saying? He says, Confucius say, fat man who walks sideways fall down a lot. That was the funniest thing I've ever heard Paul say.
Hilarious. Very good, Paul.
I don't remember that. Well, again, thank you all for coming yeah, please, anyone else, just step up but otherwise, again, we really appreciate you being here. Thank you.
In the morning. I don't remember those very well. Somebody was saying,
You guys probably don't know this, but when your dad came to Chicago, it was a big deal, as Roger Walter said. But you probably also don't know that every time he came to Chicago, he brought suits for my dad. Yeah, and that's, you know, you can never talk about that, right? But also every time he came to Chicago, he would put me and Pat, one on each knee, and he'd bounce us up and down and say, skim milk, whole milk. And he'd look at you and he would say, too much whole milk. But then the last thing is that, and I'm saying this one last on purpose, when we knew my mom was dying, he flew in to see her one last time, and he didn't make it. And he said, that was one of the biggest failures of my life, that I didn't get there soon enough to see my sister. So,
Oh, lost her.
love him forever.
Yes.
You all know Betty passed away in February of 1994. And Roger was flying in from Florida. He was down there to see Betty. She was very, very sick. And he knew it would probably be the last time they'd be together. He didn't know when he landed that she had passed away the day before. Pam, Bernie, everybody else are making arrangements. It felt to me to take Roger off the middle of the
Wow.
There was no airport security on it, just walk us to the gate. You had to wait for him to get off. I had never ever before been alone with Roger Williams. And in my head I'm thinking, okay, this is the fella who taught Mike Millea all of those lewd limericks. So I'm wondering what's this going to be like, right? And so he gets off the plane. And he didn't know that Betty passed away. So I said, Paul, you reminded me of your dad. Because he looked at me, put his hand on my shoulder, and he said, Jeffy, the day late, and he never got $1 short.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Because he was broke down, just like you were here. He then, we got in the car, he looked at me and he said, she's my big sister. I said, I know that, Roger. And he said, she took care of me. And she taught me most of what I know.
Oh, yeah.
And he said, I need to go to the funeral. Can we go find some clothes? So we went to a menswear store. It's February. He finds a nice, crisp white shirt And he asked the salesman, he said, do you have this in short sleeves? And he said, well, that's summer wear, but I'll check in the back. And I said, Roger, it's February. He said, Kathy, a urologist never, ever buys long sleeves. You know what we have to work with. And then the last little bit, we're in the Ford City Mall, a regional shopping center. There's a newsstand there, and this is the last part of the story. There's a newsstand. And on the newsstand, there is a magazine, I can't remember what magazine, but it has a cover story about Johnny Depp. That's written by Howard. And he picks it up and he shows it to me. He said, this girl's known for this.
He never told me that.
And then he bought the magazine. And then he gave it to me and he said, I've already got 50 copies.
Don't be shy.
Oh, you know what, Molly wanted me, I think most of you guys have heard this story. Oh, you don't watch just my booty voice. So at our dad's funeral, your dad came up to the thing and told a story about one of their nights out boozing it up. They were all sorts of crazy, and they got back home, and Roger was ready to just crash and hit the bed, you know, and dream the dreams from all the shenanigans he pulled that night. And Bill collapsed to his knees and started saying his prayers, hoping he wouldn't go to hell afterwards. Yeah, snoozing away, Bill's praying away, and he remained that way the rest of his life. And your dad woke up and they rolled over, and there Bill was, still on his knees, hands clasped in prayer, sound asleep. And he said that pretty much told the whole story about their relationship and how they were the yin and yang of one another. So cute, right?
So sweet, yeah. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Julie. Happy birthday to you.
And I'm going to be 90 on Monday.
And so you're here for your own. Amen.
I'm just a kid.
Yeah.
And somebody else is pushing me.
The older brothers.
You're a kid and Julie, but you inspire us all.
They were short. My kids were bigger
Right.
Happy birthday, Angela.
Yay!
I want to share at least one more story about my dad that really reflects on the trajectory of his life. And that was when he was in his early 80s. I had a friend who had been one of my ne'er-do-well friends, but his mom was one of my dad and Rudy's best friend, and they played bridge together for decades. But he was a big, strapping guy, and it was a tragic situation, but I think he was one of those who was driven to drugs and alcohol because he had been abused as a child and didn't really know how to cope with it. But he'd been to treatment numerous times. In fact, one time he came up to Minneapolis, his 8th treatment, and said, I want to be where you are. And I said, why? He said, because you sobered up, and I still can't believe it. Well, fast forward a few decades, and he was still in the throes of alcoholism and drug addiction. And he was in his early, mid-50s. And he started having severe health problems. And this guy was built like an Adonis. He was 6'4" and he was statuesque. 6'3". He was statuesque, a beautiful, physically and mentally, even emotionally person. But he was vulnerable and he was damaged. Well, his mom turned to Dad and said, he's really sick and it's gotten physical now. And he said, we don't know what's wrong with him, but he was jaundiced. So my dad says, get in the car, as he did to so many people, driving so many places, usually to treatment. And he had this way of saying it, I'll be there in the morning to pick you up. The next morning, the guy would say, I decided not to go, and he'd go, get in the car. Well, he took him to Omaha, and they diagnosed him that he had severe cirrhosis of the liver. And he had less than a year to live, unless he had a liver transplant. My dad was like 84 years old. And he said, see if I'm a match. And he was. And he offered to give a third of his liver to an alcoholic. And I thought, this could kill my dad, you know. They put him they said, we will, due to Roger Millea's influence here and his reputation and his service here, we will put you at the front of the list. But you got to do one thing. He'd already stopped drinking. He was so scared. He said, you have to stop smoking for 6 months. And he couldn't do it. And he ended up dying. He was sitting at the table with his mother, and he pulled a tooth out. And he was so scared, he got in the car and drove to Omaha from Rapid City, and they found him dead in a motel room the next day. And you know what my dad said? When I said, Dad, it was so heartbreaking about Mark. And he said, Mark was an a-hole. And I went, what? And he goes, he wouldn't quit smoking to save his own life. But I knew he loved Mark, but he could be very frank when he wanted to, and sometimes he just got angry watching the people around him hurt themselves. You know? But I've never seen anything like it. An 84-year-old man with a lot of life left in him, willing to give a third of one the most significant organs in the body to help somebody who had destroyed their own. So I thought those of you who didn't know that story might appreciate another aspect of Dad, which probably doesn't surprise anybody.